Alright, now it's time to look at the next two loops that you can use in Kotlin, and those are the while and the do while loop. But first, let's open our previous project called loops, because I'm gonna type my code there. So open your previous project. And here I already have deleted the code that we had previously here. But if you have the code, delete it, and let's start our discussion about the while loop. So first I'm gonna type while. This is how you declare the while loop. And here you can press enter to fill in the while key and the parentheses for you, or you can type manually the while and the parentheses. So I'm gonna press enter to fill in that for me. And next you put a space and you put curly brace here. So I'm gonna put the left curly brace and press enter, and the right curly brace is gonna be added automatically, as you can see on the line 5. Now, a while loop loops as long as a certain condition is true. In contrast to the for loop, which loops for a specific number of time, a while loop loops as long as a condition or an expression is true. So this gives us more flexibility in circumstances where we don't know for what specific number of times we want our code to be repeated. So we put our condition inside the parentheses here, and as long as this condition is true, the code inside the curly brace is going to be executed repeatedly. So let's see how we can do that. So first, let's declare a variable here. I'm going to call it number, and I'm going to assign a value of 0 to it. And here I'm going to type while number is less than 10. Inside the curly brace, I'm going to type the println function, and we're going to output the value of our number, and then we're going to increment the value of our number. So I'm going to put number, I'm going to use the increment operator, plus, plus. Let's put a space here to have things more clear. Now, if you run this code, you're going to see the numbers from 0 to 9. So what is happening, how this works? First, we've declared a variable, we assign a value of 0 to it. Next, we loop using the while loop. And first, the while loop is checking to see if this condition inside the parentheses is true. So it checks to see if the value of our variable number is less than 10. And it's true because we have 0. Then it executes the code inside the curly braces, and it outputs the value of our number in the console using the println function. Then it increments the value of our number, and then it loops again. But now the value of our number is 1. So now it will compare again if the value of our number is less than 10, which is true. It will loop again, it will output its value, it will increment its value, so now we have 2, and so on until it reaches 9. When it reaches 9, it will increment the value, it will output the value in the console, it will increment its value, then it will check again to see if this condition is true, but now the value is going to be 10 because it was incremented when it was 9. And this condition is going to evaluate to false, and the code inside the curly braces is not going to be executed. This is why we don't have 10 here. And it executes the code that comes below our while loop. But because we don't have any code, the program is terminated. And you can write this thing in one single line, but it's recommended to use this form only if you know that you have one single statement in your loop. So if I can delete this too, and I can put here directly number plus plus, and because this returns the value, it increments the value and it returns the value, it's an expression, I can run this code and it will have the same output. But if I delete the increment operator after the variable, and if I put it before, now I'm gonna see a different output here, because this increments the value of our number, then it decrements the value of our number, and this is called prefix increment. So this is called prefix incrementing, and the previous one, let's press Ctrl Z. This is called postfix increment. So this is postfix because it's at the end of our variable, and if you put the increment operator at the beginning of our variable is called prefix of increment. Anyway, let's press Ctrl Z to have the code that we had previously and the curly braces. Now look what happens if I delete the increment, if I don't increment our variable now. Now let's talk what is happening. Because we don't increment the variable and the variable always has the value of 0, this will always be true. And it will execute the code inside the curly braces forever. So we'll have what is called an infinite loop. So if you run this code, now you can see that it prints 0 forever, because this condition never evaluates to false. So let's stop this by pressing on this red square. So now the process, the program is terminated. So this is why you need to increment the value of our number, because we want that condition to be false at some point in the future. Next, let's say that I assign here 10. So if I run this code, now this condition is going to be false because 10 is not less than 10. And the code inside the curly braces is not going to be executed. So now we have no output here because this condition is evaluates to false and it's not executing the code inside the curly braces. But there are certain situations where you'll want to have your code executed at least once, even though the initial condition or the initial expression is false. So if I delete the curly braces and the code inside the curly braces here, now to do what I said, to execute the code even though the condition is initially set to false, to execute the code at least once, you need to use a do while loop. And to use a do while loop, you put here a do, press enter to add the curly braces, and we put our while at the end of our enclosing curly brace of our do. And here inside the curly brace, I'm going to put our println function, and I'm going to output the value of our variable number. So now if you run this, now you get 10, because this executes the code inside the curly braces at least once, and after that it comes down here and it checks to see if this condition is true or false. And if this condition is true, it will repeat the code, but if the condition is false, it will not repeat the code. But the important aspect here is that it will execute the code inside the curly braces at least once, irrespective of our condition, if the condition is true or false. In our case, it's false. So these are the 3 loops that you can use in a Kotlin: the for loop, the while loop, and the do while loop. Now it's time to see how you can use the continue and the break keywords with those loops. So let's press Ctrl Z to undo the code to have the while loop back, because I'm going to start with the while loop and to see how we can use the break and continue keywords with the while loop. Let's bring this up a little bit. So let's first look at the continue keyword, and the continue keyword can be used to bypass a section of code. So let's say that I want to skip the number 7 in our loop. So I can type here if our variable number equals 2, so 2 equals 7. Let's put curly braces, press enter to add the right curly brace, continue. So now what this is going to do is, when it's going to reach the number 7 and this condition is going to be true, it's going to call continue, and it's going to bypass the code that comes below of our if statement. So if you run this code, look what happens. It happens nothing, because here our number has a value of 10, so this condition is false, so the code is not executed. So let's put here 0. Now if you run this code, so you get 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. But and you see that at 7 it skips the code. But why don't have the next numbers? This is because unintentionally we created here an infinite loop. So let's stop this and to explain. So what happens here is that because we say here explicitly to check here explicitly, we check here to see if our number is equal to 7, then we're going to continue. In other words, you're going to skip the code which comes below of our if then statement. Then this code is never called. So this code is never called, the println, and more importantly, the increment operator is never called on our number variable. And because of that, because our variable is not incremented here, when it's gonna loop again, it will have again the value 7. So this condition in the if is gonna evaluate again to true, and it's gonna call continue again. And because this code again is never reached, this code, and the value is not incremented, it will still have the value 7. So this is gonna evaluate again to true. So it does this forever. And to change that, we need to put our number and which is incremented before our if, and that is gonna solve the problem. So now if I Now if I run the code, let's increase this. Now get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 7 is skipped, then 8, 9, and 10. Because now when this condition evaluates to true, it will continue. It's not going to print the code. It's not going to be executed below of our if. And it will come back to loop, and now it's going to increment the value, and the value is going to be 8 instead of 7. This is going to evaluate to false, and the continue is not going to be called. And it will print the number 8, and it will do the same for it will increment the value again, and then we'll have 9 and so on. So this is how you can use the continue keyword, and you have to be careful where you put where you increment your variable, because as you saw, you can easily get into an infinite loop. Now you can have a more complex expression here. So you can put here if number is greater than, let's say, 2, and number is less than 8. Now if you run this, look what happens. Now you get 1, 2, and then we get 8, 9, and 10. Because what this condition now checks is if our number is greater than 10 and less than 8, then continue, then skip that number. So this is why the numbers between 2 and 8 are skipped, because we call continue on them. And if you hover over here, you see that it says the two comparisons should be converted to a range check. So we can write the same condition that we have here using a range, but this is different from a range that you've used in a for loop, in the sense that this is now checking to see if our number is in the range from 3 to 7. So if you run this code, now I have the exact same output, but now we are using the range to check to see if our number is in that range. And if it is that range, we call continue to skip that. The next thing that you can do is you can break the loop. You can stop the loop using the break keyword. So I can say here again, if number equals, let's say 7, call break. So I'm going to type here break. Now when this condition is going to evaluate to true, it's going to call break, and the loop is going to stop. It's not going to execute any line of code after that. It's going to stop, it's going to leave, and it's going to execute the code which comes below of here. But in our case, we don't have any code. So you see that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and when it reaches 7, it breaks, and it's stopping the loop. It's not printing the value, and it executes the loop. So it terminates. So and we can do the same thing with for loop. So we can use the continue and break with a for loop. So you can type here for, let's say I in, let's create let's say 0 to 10. Let's create this range, let's add the curly braces. Now I can say here if I in, let's say 3 to 8, then continue. Let's print the value. Let's type here println. Let's print the value of I here. So now if you run this code, so we have our first loop, which loops to 6, and then it breaks because you call break there. Then it's using the for loop, it loops from 0 to 10, but because here we're checking to see if our number is in the range 3 to 8, then skip it. You get 0, 1, 2, and then the numbers, the 3 and the numbers between the 3 and the numbers between 3 and 8 inclusive are skipped here. So we have 0, 1, 2, and then the numbers between 2 and 9 are skipped, and we have 9 and 10. And we can use also the break keyword with the for. So I can put here if I equals 7, break. So now if you run this code, now you get 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and when it reaches 7, it breaks. Similar to our while loop. So this is how you can use the break and continue keyword with the while and for loop, and you can use the break and continue keyword also with the do while loop. Next, we're gonna look at how we can nest loops within each others, and we're gonna look at an example using the while loop. So I'm gonna delete the code of the for loop and the println statement there. I'm gonna delete the if then statement, the break keyword, and I'm gonna bring the println function up there. Down here I'm gonna declare a variable. It's gonna be a var. I'm gonna call it I, and I'm gonna assign a value of 0 to it. Now, inside the while loop, I'm gonna type another while loop. Here I'm gonna put a condition while I is less than 5. We're gonna increment I, and we're gonna output the value of I in the console. But let's put some text here to make clear what loop is looping. So I'm gonna put 3 asterisk signs here. I'm gonna type the $sign and I. So now if you run this code, let's also change this condition to less than 5. So if you run this code, now we get, first we get 1, then we get our code inside of our inner while loop, which is the 3 asterisks, and we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then it loops again. But let's take this code line by line to explain what is happening here. So first we declare this variable called number, we assign a value of 0 to it, then we loop using the while loop, the outer loop, and it checks to see if this condition is true, and it's true, 0 is less than 5, so it executes the code inside the curly braces, and it increments the value of our number by 1, then it outputs the value of our number in the console, so we get here 1. Then it declares this variable called I, and then it starts looping inside our outer loop while using the inner loop while, so it loops here 5 times. So when it finishes, it goes back, and now the value was incremented by 1, it will check again if the condition is true, it will execute the code inside the curly brace, it will increment the value now, so it will have 2, it will output that value, so now we have 2 here. And then it will loop again 5 times using the inner loop, and it will do the same thing for the next round and the next round until we get to 5. When we'll get to 5 will not be less than 5, and this condition will evaluate to false, and the code inside the curly brace is not going to be executed. Alright? And you can use the break keyword inside the inner loop. So I can say here if, you can put it above here. So I can say if I equals 0, then break. And you can put the break and continue keywords in one single line if you want. You can avoid the curly braces. So now if you run this code, now get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because now when it reaches the inner loop, it breaks immediately at every iteration in the outer loop. So when it comes down here, it will check to see if this condition is true. It's going to be true, but when it gets to the if statement, it will break. It will stop the loop. So it will execute only the outer loop. And with a break keyword, you can not target only the loop. So with this break keyword, we stop only this while loop that we are currently, that is currently the nearest loop. But there is something which is called labels, and with labels you can target an outer loop. So you can break the outer loop here. So you can break the while loop which is here. And to do that, we give to our while loop a label. So we type here a name. I'm going to call it outer, and we put at. Now here you can put break, and now I'm going to type at, and you put outer, and this should be a single word. Now if you run this, look what happens. Now you get 1 because it breaks the outer loop. So it first evaluates this condition, it increments the value of our number, it prints the value of a number, and then it goes in the inner loop, it checks to see if this condition is true, it's true. Then it checks to see if I is equal to 0, which is true. Then it breaks, but now it's not breaking this loop, this inner loop. It's breaking the outer loop. So it's breaking this loop. So this is why you get only 1, and the code is not executed because it breaks the outer loop, and the code, our code, it's terminated because down here we don't have any code. So this is how you can use labels with the break keyword to target an outer loop, and the labels can be used also with the continue keyword and in other loops that we've looked at. So this is our discussion about loops. What you can do, I should say, is that you cannot target with the labels an inner loop from an outer loop. So you cannot, you can give here a label to our inner loop, but you cannot target our inner loop from our outer loop. So this is our discussion about loops, and in the next video we're gonna do a challenge.